How does a state allegedly lose nearly $10 billion of taxpayer money? And not to, sophisticated foreign hackers, but to staggering industrial scale fraud happening right under the nose of its own agencies. That's the huge question we're asking today. We're doing a deep dive into what federal prosecutors and even the state's own auditors have called a monumental failure of accountability in Minnesota.
And the scale here is it's just massive. First Assistant U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson recently put out a statistic that is, frankly, hard to even wrap your head around.
What was it?
They estimate that up to $9 billion, that's a billion with a B, might be fraudulent. And that's across just 14 high-risk Minnesota Medicaid services since 2018.
$9 billion. So to put that into perspective for you, the total cost of those programs was $18 billion.
Exactly. So Thompson is suggesting that potentially, on the order of half or more of the money spent in those programs could be based on completely fake claims. He called it staggering industrial-scale fraud. And we need to be clear about what that means. We're not talking about, small billing errors. The allegation is that companies were created for the sole purpose of providing zero services.
Just shells to pocket federal money.
Precisely. Money that was supposed to go to the state's most vulnerable residents.
So that $9 billion figure, that kind of sets the stage. But let's zoom in on a specific case that really shows how this happened. A perfect, documented example of the systemic failure.
The $250 million Feeding Our Future scandal.
Right. Our mission today is to get past the headlines and really uncover how state departments, despite, numerous and blatant warnings, allowed this level of public theft to happen.
What's so fascinating, or maybe infuriating, is the sheer audacity of it. Thompson said the money was allegedly diverted for, immense personal enrichment.
Things like what?
Things like international travel, luxury vehicles, and lavish lifestyles. It confirms a core concern for anyone who's skeptical of government management. When these programs are run carelessly, they just become magnets for criminals.
It's a total breakdown of basic integrity checks. So let's drill down on that Feeding Our Future scheme, the $250 million fraud. It exploited two big federal nutrition programs, right?
Yes, the CACFP and the SFSP. Basically, they're supposed to reimburse nonprofits for providing meals to children and adults in need.
Okay, so if you look at the growth of this one nonprofit, Feeding Our Future, the red flags must have been obvious.
Obvious is an understatement. They were practically on fire. Between just fiscal year 2020 and 2021, payments from the Minnesota Department of Education, or MDE, to Feeding Our Future went up by, get this, 2,800%.
Wait, say that again? 2,800%.
2,800% in 1 year. That's 28 times the money. You just don't see that kind of growth in a legitimate service organization. It's impossible without some kind of massive verifiable event.
So how did that compare to other similar groups?
Well, that's the thing. Spending across all sponsors went up a lot, about 382%, probably because of the pandemic. But even that is dwarfed. Feeding Our Future was a massive outlier. Its number of sites more than tripled. It was a clear statistical anomaly that MDE just failed to act on.
Which is the core question, isn't it? If you know other groups are growing at, say, 400%, why isn't a 2,800% jump treated as definitive proof that something is fundamentally broken?
That's the billion-dollar question. And when the Office of the Legislative Auditor, the OLA, which is the state's own independent watchdog, when they looked into it, their findings were just devastating.
What did they say?
They said MDE's oversight was inadequate. And more than that MDE's actions and inactions created opportunities for fraud. So they didn't just miss it, they basically set the table for the theft.
Wow. Okay, so let's shift to the timeline. When did MDE have a chance to stop this? The OLA said they knew about red flags before the fraud really exploded in 2020.
Oh, absolutely. They weren't flying blind. MDE had raised concerns about Feeding Our Future's applications and budgets almost every single time they reviewed them. This wasn't a new group they knew nothing about.
So they had a history with them.
A long one. As early as 2017, MDE questioned if the organization was even financially viable. They denied an application. But then Feeding Our Future appealed, and MDE just folded. They approved it. That set a terrible precedent.
And it seems like there's a real lack of just basic common sense verification.
That's a key finding from the OLA. MDE simply didn't take steps to verify what Feeding Our Future was claiming, even when the claims were completely implausible.
Give us an example.
Okay, a great one is about serving meals. MDE's own notes show that Feeding Our Future didn't have catering contracts for 80 of its proposed meal sites.
Which means?
It means they were claiming that all 80 of those individual sites could prepare their own complex, compliant meals on site. MDE had the power to ask for proof, like, lists of kitchen equipment or just visit a site. But the OLA found they did not. They
Sure.
just didn't do it.
So they just accepted the paperwork from an organization they already had serious doubts about. That is a fundamental failure of due diligence.
And the claims weren't just a little inflated. They were absurd.
How absurd.
One site claimed it had a meal service capacity comparable to the entire St. Paul public school district.
The entire school district.
The whole district. Think about the logistics, the kitchens, the staff needed for that.
Yeah.
MDE noted this extreme claim in its own files and again did nothing. No site visit, no request for attendance logs or meal counts, nothing. When a claim is that far outside the realm of possibility, the failure to verify isn't just an oversight, it's a choice.
Which brings us to the excuses, right? When this all came out, MDE fell back on blaming the bureaucracy.
Right. They claimed that the pandemic waivers made oversight difficult and created ambiguity. They were basically using the COVID crisis as a shield for their own failures.
But the auditors didn't buy that.
Not for a second. The OLA had a very sharp rebuttal. They argued that the flexibility from those waivers, like being able to do virtual reviews, should have made it easier to focus on high-risk sponsors, like feeding our future, not harder.
So they had the tools.
They had the tools and the authority. But instead of using that flexibility to target the biggest red flag in their system, they actually limited their own efforts. They actively chose not to prioritize program integrity.
It just gets worse when you look at how they handled complaints.
It really does. MDE got at least 30 separate complaints between 2018 and 2021. Allegations of kickbacks, mismanagement, serious stuff.
And what was their process for investigating?
This part is truly shocking. MDE's own procedure was often to ask the subject of the complaint, in this case, feeding our future, to investigate the complaint about itself.
You can't be serious.
It's the definition of the fox guarding the henhouse, but written down as official government policy. It's unbelievable.
So you send the fraud complaint to the alleged fraudster and ask them to write a report on themselves.
That's essentially what happened. And they would dismiss serious allegations. For example, a claim that the executive director was improperly in charge, they said that wasn't a program irregularity.
But if the person overseeing hundreds of millions of federal dollars is running a criminal enterprise, I mean, that seems like the biggest irregularity possible.
You would think so. But the state failed to classify these major red flags with the severity they demanded.
Okay, let's talk about the peak of this negligence. The meal claim validation in March of 2021. MDE paid out over $10 million for about 3.8 million meals.
And their own internal review documents show huge objective problems. Things like missing attendance records, which are a basic requirement.
And what else?
And, even more incredibly, vendor invoices that included things like receipts for a car wash and a pressure washer.
Wait, hold on. Car wash receipts using federal money meant for feeding children.
Yes, they were clearly unallowable expenses for a nutrition program.
And someone at MDE saw these receipts and still signed off on the $10 million payment.
The documents show the staff noted the problems, including the bizarre expenses. But despite seeing this clear, physical evidence of abuse, MDE paid all the claims. They didn't launch a major fraud investigation. They just rubber-stamped it.
That's the system failing at its most basic level, when paying out the money is more important than checking if it's real.
And this all connects back to the bigger picture, of course. This kind of failure provides a lot of ammunition for people who are critical of big government programs. U.S. Attorney Thompson didn't mince words. He implicitly blamed the state, saying it has not done a good job of minding these programs.
And that has political fallout, obviously.
Of course. It reinforces claims that Minnesota, under the current administration, has become a hub for fraudulent activity using taxpayer dollars. And the consequences are real. 70 people have been charged in just this one food aid scheme. The cost isn't just in dollars, it's in the public's trust in government.
So what has the state's response been?
Well, the MDE commissioner has tried to shift blame, saying the responsibility lies with the indicted and convicted fraudsters. But they have taken some steps. They've established an Office of Inspector General, and they're updating their tech systems.
Which sounds good, but...
But the new system, CLECS, isn't estimated to be finished until December 2025. So, these are fixes that are years away from being fully implemented long after hundreds of millions of dollars have already walked out the door.
So, wrapping this all up for you, what our deep dive really reveals is that from that potential $9 billion Medicaid gap to the documented $250 million theft, this wasn't an accident.
No, it was procedural. The state ignored incredible growth. They failed to verify completely implausible claims, and they built processes that basically stopped them from policing their own programs.
And that allowed pure greed to just drain these crucial federal resources that were supposed to help vulnerable people.
And that's the core takeaway for you to consider. These huge numbers aren't just abstract figures on a page. They represent a massive failure of state management to protect public trust and taxpayer money.
So here's the final thought. When government agencies prioritize their own bureaucratic processes and flimsy appeals over doing rigorous, independent financial verification, how many more billions of our dollars have to be stolen before basic program integrity becomes the #1 unassailable priority? That's something to think about as these programs continue to operate and expand all across the country.